Hello boys and girls, did you miss me? Today we're going to be taking a look in World of Warships at the mighty Fuso, the Japanese Tier 6 battleship, the successor to the Congo at Tier 5, which I love dearly, and the predecessor to the Nagato at Tier 7. As is traditional with warships of all nations, not just the Japanese, this was not the first ship to bear the name Fuso. It is in fact the second. The first one was an ironclad, built in 1877, and served in the Imperial Japanese Navy until it was struck from the Naval Register in 1908. Other than the part she played in the Battle of the Yalu River on the 17th of September 1894, the original ironclad Fuso had a pretty unremarkable career. During the battle she was hit dozens of times by Chinese 6-inch guns, but not one of them penetrated her armour. Only 5 of her crew were killed and 9 wounded. In return, the Fuso unloaded 29 240mm shots, 32 170mm shots, 136 75mm shots, 164 2.5 and 3 pounder shots, and fired over 1,500 bullets from her machine guns. And that was pretty much it for the ironclad Fuso. It remained in service with the Imperial Japanese Navy and was eventually struck from the Navy Register in 1908. At which point the Japanese decided they really liked the look of those dreadnoughts that the British were building, and so the second ship to bear the name Fuso was a Japanese World War I vintage dreadnought battleship. And so this is the Fuso that we have in World of Warships. Well, it is and it isn't. This is the Fuso as she was undergoing her sea trials on the 24th of August 1915 before being accepted into commission in the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Fuso that we have in World of Warships is the World War II version of the same ship. It was obviously, like the Congo before it, upgraded extensively between the wars. The name Fuso, by the way, means Japan. It's the ancient classical term for the Japanese home islands. The Fuso actually had a pretty unremarkable career. She was laid down on the 11th of March 1912, launched on the 28th of March 1914, commissioned after her sea trials into the Japanese Navy on the 8th of November 1915, and yet she played no part in World War I. Between the wars, the only things of note that happened to the Fuso were the 2 modernisation periods, which turned her into the ship that you see now, and the Great Kanto earthquake of 1923, where she assisted survivors of the disaster. The modernisation that was done to the Fuso during the 2 extensive refit periods between the First and Second World Wars included the addition of armoured torpedo bulges along the side of the ships to improve her protection against torpedo attack. The ship was lengthened, her draft was increased, she was fitted with a pagoda-style mast extensively covered in fire directors, rangefinders, and eventually radar. She was given 3 seaplane spotter aircraft and a catapult with which to launch them, and her steam turbines were stripped out and replaced with oil-fired boilers. None of this, however, really turned the Fuso into a proper World War II class battleship, and that was because the Fuso, like the Congo before her, still had 14-inch guns. Now, those are big guns, and the Fuso had a lot of them, but this of course was a time when most modern battleships were being constructed with 15, 16, and even 18-inch guns. As a result, the Fuso was often relegated to the less glamorous jobs during World War II, assigned to divisions that were being used as reserves while the superstars went in and did the heavy lifting. Technically, the Fuso took part in the attack on Pearl Harbor, although in actual fact all the Fuso did was hang around with the battleships Nagato and Mutsu and the light carrier Hosho in the event that the first air fleet that was actually conducting the attack on Pearl Harbor required additional assistance, and it didn't. And that kind of set the tone for the Fuso's entire World War II career, always hanging around in reserve, waiting to be needed, but never ended up being needed. Kind of like the fat kid during sports lessons at school, always the last one to be picked for the team. Unfortunately for the Fuso, she just wasn't a particularly lucky ship, and the first and only time she got involved in any kind of major battle in World War II was the last time she got involved in any kind of major battle anywhere. During the Battle of the Surigao Strait, at 8 minutes past 9 on the morning of the 24th of October 1944, the Fuso, her sister ship, the Yamashiro, and the heavy cruiser the Mogami spotted a group of 27 aircraft launched by the USS Enterprise, including Avenger torpedo bombers, Helldiver dive bombers, escorted by F-6 Hellcat fighters. Fuso survived the attack but was hit twice by armour-piercing bombs, one of them destroying her catapult and knocking out 2 of her float planes, the other one penetrating the deck near the number 2 turret and killing everybody in the number 1 secondary battery below. Fuso began to take on water and started to develop a list to starboard. At 1:05 the next morning, her panicky gunners spotted a shape in the darkness off her port bow and opened fire. It turned out to be the cruiser Mogami. Mogami was lucky in that the only casualties suffered were 3 sailors killed in her sickbay. 2 days later, during further fighting in the battle, at 3 in the morning, Fuso was struck amidships by anything up to 2 torpedoes, possibly fired by the American destroyer, the USS Melvin. She began to list heavily to starboard, slowed down, fell out of formation, and sank less than 40 minutes later. Of her crew of 1,198, there were only 10 survivors. And that was it for the Fuso. The poor old girl never really did anybody any harm. Here in World of Warships, however, this is a real powerhouse of a battleship. She is very different from the Tier 5 Congo, however, in a number of significant ways. First, she doesn't have anything close to the speed and manoeuvrability of the Congo. The Congo could do 31 knots. The Fuso is limited to a top speed of 25 knots, and it also doesn't turn as quickly as the Congo did, which makes it a big fat juicy target for torpedo bombers. However, what the Fuso does have up its sleeve, while it still has the same 14-inch guns as the Congo, it's got a lot more of them. The Congo had 8 14-inch guns mounted in 4 turrets. The Fuso has 12 14-inch guns mounted in 6 turrets, 2 forward, 2 aft, and 2 amidships. Speaking of the guns, let's take a closer look at them, because the gun upgrade that's available for the Fuso is an unusual one, and I'll show you what I mean. The stock 360mm or 14-inch guns that you get on the Fuso fresh out of the box once you've unlocked it fire 2 rounds per minute. They take 47.4 seconds to rotate 180 degrees. That's very slow. Maximum high explosive shell damage 4,100. Maximum armor piercing shell damage 11,010. With the gun upgrade fitted, you get a practically unnoticeable 0.1 rounds per minute increase to your rate of fire, but you pay for that by having an extra 2.6 seconds in the length of time it takes you to rotate the turrets 180 degrees. It now takes 50 seconds. The high explosive shell damage and the armor piercing shell damage is exactly the same. So as you can see, I have researched the gun upgrade on my Fuso, but I haven't fitted it. For me, the ability to get the guns actually turned around and pointed at a target outweighs a practically unnoticeable increase in the rate of fire. Your mileage may of course vary, but that's the way I've set up my Fuso. Now, the Fuso is a slow ship, top speed of 25 knots, doesn't turn very well. All of this combines to make it a fairly juicy target for torpedo bombers, and certainly with the initial stock hull setup, you're going to suffer when you come under aircraft attack. However, by unlocking the hull upgrade, you slightly less than double the anti-aircraft offensive firepower. Now, it is mostly self-defense anti-aircraft guns, lots and lots of 25mm gun batteries, but what it does mean is that while you don't have the anti-aircraft firepower of an anti-aircraft cruiser like the Cleveland, for example, anybody who's launching torpedo attacks against you from the air is going to lose 1, 2, possibly more of those torpedo bombers, hopefully, before they can get the torpedoes launched in the water. So while you're not particularly good at avoiding torpedo attack, you are not bad at shooting down the torpedo bombers going for you and reducing the amount of torpedoes that you actually have to contend with. The stock fire control system allows you to fire your guns out to a range of 19.8 kilometers. With the upgrade, that range extends to 21.8 kilometers. As far as upgrades are concerned, I've gone with the following. Main battery modification 1. 20% less chance that your magazines are going to detonate if your citadel gets penetrated, 20% less chance that your guns are going to get knocked out in the first place, and 20% faster repair to your guns if the worst happens and they do get knocked out. Next, I've gone with main battery modification 2, which means the guns load 10% faster, so better rate of fire, and more importantly, the turrets rotate 15% faster. In the third slot, I've gone for the damage control modification, and I do firmly believe that every battleship should have this fitted if you can afford it, because it reduces the chance that you're going to flood, and it reduces the chance that you're going to be set on fire when you get hit. Battleships are big targets. You're going to get hit. You're going to get hit a lot. And this modification reduces the chance that those hits are going to set you on fire or are going to flood you, so that you can keep that damage control ability off cooldown, ready for when you really, really need it the most. Last but definitely not least, steering gear modification. 20% faster rudder shift time helps you turn the ship faster and avoid those inevitable torpedo attacks. So that's the Fuso and my recommendations for what equipment you should fit to it. Now, let's see what the old girl can do. The first clip I'm going to show you is from the Islands of Ice map, and I'm not showing you the whole game because it was largely unremarkable except for this one incident. Now there's an enemy Nagato way off in the distance. That's the tier 7 battleship. There he is. Now that guy has 16-inch guns, but this Fuso is on very low health. Now I still have 39,000 health at this point. I missed the opportunity to sink that Fuso with my first barrage, and as I'm aiming at him and waiting to reload, that Nagato has lined me up in his sights, and boom, there. I just lost like half of my health, which is not good. And now the enemy Fuso is shooting at me as well. I've used my damage repair ability, but I am on perilously low health here. And that Nagato is obviously reloading his guns for a second shot. So I get my guns reloaded, I fire, and I should have done it with the first barrage I fired, but I killed the Fuso. Now that Nagato is looking at me on low health with his 16-inch gun batteries, and he's licking his lips. And he has nearly 50,000 health remaining. If he hits me again like he did the first time, it's all over. But his second barrage isn't nearly as accurate, and they all miss. And now my little 14-inch guns, well, compared to his guns, are ready. And here they go. 48,000 health remaining on that Nagato. Not anymore. 12 shots fired, 5 of them penetrated his citadel. So the citadel penetrating shots and their armor piercing all do maximum damage, and they all do 11,000 damage, and 5 of them hit. So yeah, bye bye, and that really rustled his jimmies. As you can imagine, it would. But don't worry, I'm sure it'll polish out. Shortly afterwards, just as an example of the sort of thing you can expect if you come under air attack in a Fuso, enemy dive bomber squadron coming in. Now, I'm not 100% alone here. There is a cruiser not far behind me, but he's too far away to be able to actually get the mass of his anti-aircraft fire up against these dive bombers. But with his long-range anti-aircraft fire and my close-range self-defense anti-aircraft fire, I'll take minimal damage from those dive bombers. Now, here comes a squadron of torpedo bombers, and they're going for me, but I'm turning to port anyway, so I continue the turn to port. We start shooting these guys down. He's going to launch any second, but he keeps losing torpedo bombers. How many torpedoes is he going to get away? Here he comes, there's the launch, and 2 survivors. And none of those torpedo bombers made it back to the carrier. And they're just coming at... Oh, in fact, it's not even an anti-aircraft cruiser, it's another battleship, so... yeah. Battleship, self-defense, anti-aircraft firepower. Not bad at all. Next up, I've got a co-op battle for you. Now, I don't normally play co-op battles because you don't get as much experience and credits as you do in random battles, but this was at something stupid like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning and hardly anybody was on, and for some bizarre reason, the people that were on were all in the co-op battle queue, so co-op battle it is. Now, obviously, in co-op battle, you're playing against the AI, rather than actual players. But the AI isn't bad in World of Warships. It can be very unpredictable. Now, I wouldn't normally recommend wasting shots against the destroyer if you're in a battleship, but I happen to have high explosive loaded, and he was right there, so yeah, why not? Didn't have anything else to shoot at.
Enemy destroyer foundered.
Now, there is an enemy battleship over there. He's nearly 10 kilometers away, which is actually optimal firing range for these 14-inch guns. But I don't have a direct line of fire to him, and you're going to see me do some remarkably stupid things during the course of this particular clip. But if it's stupid and it works, it isn't stupid. So I'm reloading armor piercing, and I'm turning the guns around, and I'm slowing down in anticipation of putting shots into that battleship, but then suddenly a wild cruiser appears, and I've got armor piercing loaded, and the guns are about ready to fire. So, you know, it would really be rude not to shoot him. So, shots out, and I really can't miss from this kind of range, and bingo. One, I think it was in Omaha, knocked out. Now that battleship, he's taking his time coming around the headland over there, and I'm pretty much dead in the water here, and that's when an enemy destroyer pops up. And the only way I could be in a worst possible situation here was if that friendly destroyer wasn't there running interference for me. Yeah. Now, this enemy destroyer is close enough now that my secondary gun batteries, that's what you can see actually shooting at him. And yes, one of my secondary gun batteries, which I have no control over, did accidentally hit that friendly destroyer. His engines have been knocked out, he's in trouble. And I am actually, with armour-piercing shells loaded, trying to turn my gun turrets around to shoot at this destroyer. And this is a perfect example of why it is almost always a waste of time turning your main gun batteries on a destroyer at point blank range, because they just don't turn fast enough to be able to shoot at targets that move as quickly as a destroyer. Now there's somebody else shooting at him, but, well, okay, he's popped smoke, but where are his torpedoes? Why did he not fire torpedoes at me? I can only guess that he just emptied his torpedo tubes at that friendly destroyer, but now here come the big guns. That's an enemy Fuso. And because I wasted all that time turning all of my gun batteries around to point at that destroyer that I was never going to be able to track and hit, all of my gun turrets are now pointing in exactly the wrong direction when... And I knew this Fuso was coming around the headland, but I allowed myself to be distracted by an AI destroyer. Now I'm going to pay the price for it. My two forward batteries are now on target, but the midships and rear batteries are going to take forever to get turned around. And while I'm trying to get the guns pointed at this Fuso, I'm taking fire. It's the destroyer. There he is. You can't see him, of course, but he's peppering me with his 127mm shells. And more through luck than judgment, I managed to avoid his first torpedo salvo. And... hang on. I didn't even see him and I managed to sink him. That's the secondary batteries on battleships, particularly tier 5 and higher battleships. Destroyer captains, I understand the temptation. Particularly American destroyers with your short-range torpedoes. You want to get in close and ensure you get a kill. But don't loiter around inside the secondary gun battery range of big battleships, because no good will come of it. Meanwhile, I have Fuso problems, but I've managed to get most of my gun turrets around, and now we're so close that we're exchanging secondary gunfire with each other as well. I'm not shooting at him alone, however. There is... I'm not entirely sure what, but he's taking fire from at least one other ship. And there's a destroyer closing in to do a torpedo run on him. Actually, there's more than one destroyer closing in to do a torpedo run on him. And I'm not in a terrible position, actually. I'm trying to turn the ship, but I'm reversing, so I'm actually turning it the wrong way. And making it more difficult for me to get my front gun batteries pointed at him, but my rear batteries are able to fire. And for some bizarre reason, this guy has actually turned his guns around and he's shooting at somebody else, not me. So, hurrah! We've set him on fire. And just to reinforce the point blank range torpedo attack from a friendly destroyer, and he's been nailed by this guy's secondary batteries. And this guy is actually trying to ram me. See that? See how close that was? And yeah, I took a hit from the friendly torpedo fired by that destroyer, but I really can't complain about it because he totally saved my life. At the cost of his own. Look at how close that guy came to ramming me. And this is what I love about the AI in the co-op battles in World of Warships. You just cannot predict what they're going to do. It's not like other games where after you've played a while, you pretty much know how the bots are going to react in any given circumstance. You never get that in World of Warships. I do really like the Fuso. I miss the manoeuvrability and the speed that you get in the Congo at tier 5, but I'm quite happy to trade that in for the massive firepower upgrade you get. I mean, the Congo didn't have bad firepower. It had 8 14-inch guns, but this thing's got 12. It's not quite double the firepower, but it certainly hits them where it hurts. Everybody I've spoken to who plays Japanese battleships, they all say the same thing. Everybody loves the Congo at tier 5, and there's a lot to love about the Congo at tier 5. It's got a fantastic combination of speed, protection, and firepower. But the Fuso at tier 6, everybody says the same thing. While they loved the Congo's speed and manoeuvrability, they wouldn't trade it in a second for the firepower that you get with the 12 14-inch guns of the Fuso at tier 6. This thing packs one hell of a punch. And in the Imperial Japanese Navy battleship line, that punch just keeps getting bigger, because the Nagato at tier 7, while it doesn't have as many guns as the Fuso at tier 6, it's got bigger guns. It replaces the 14-inch guns of the Congo and the Fuso with the 16.1-inch guns of the Nagato. I've just unlocked my Nagato, and I've already had one hilarious game in it. Hopefully I'll be bringing that to you soon. But for now, the Fuso, Japanese tier 6 battleship. It's a really, really good ship. Massive firepower upgrade over the Congo at the expense of some of that speed and manoeuvrability, but it's totally, totally worth it. Hope you enjoyed the video, folks. As always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.